Hi, this is Nate Perrin, pastor of Out Friends Church. Thank you for tuning in today. We're going to go over the Illuminate Bible study series from Barclay Press. I'm going to be reading from Leviticus 25, 1 through 18 on page 78. I'm only going to be reading the first 4 verses. And then Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 15. I'm going to be reading verses 1 through 5 and then 14 through 15. And if you're easily distracted, the shirt says Lucero. It's hard to describe. It's a country rock band, basically. I have a lot of lounging shirts, and sometimes I forget what I'm wearing. So I'm going to start on page 78, and the verses will be 1 through 5. 17 through 18, but the whole context is Leviticus 25, 1 through 18. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, the land shall observe a Sabbath for the Lord. 6 years ye shall sow your field, and 6 years ye shall prune your vineyard, and gather in their yield. But in the Sabbath year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest, or gather the grapes of your unpruned vine. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. You shall not cheat one another, but ye shall fear your God. For I am the Lord your God. You shall observe my statutes and faithfully keep my ordinances, so that you may live on the land securely." Alright, so the first 5 verses of Deuteronomy 15. The whole passage is Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 15. Every 7th year ye shall grant a remission of debts. And this is the manner of the remission. Every creditor shall remit the claim that is held against the neighbor, not exacting it of a neighbor who is a member of the community, because the Lord's remission has been proclaimed. Of a foreigner you may exact it, but you must remit your claim on whatever any member of your community holds it. However, there will, however, be no one in need among you, because the Lord is sure to bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a possession to occupy. If only you will obey the Lord your God by diligently observing this entire commandment that I command you today. And then verses 14 through 15. Provide liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress, thus giving to him some of the bounty to which the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. And for this reason, I'll lay this command upon you today. Alright, so let's remind ourselves what the point of the Old Testament is. The United States is not a covenantal community with God. We're not the Hebrews. So we can't read ourselves too much into the community laws around here. We could take inspiration from a lot of them. Not necessarily for the gnarly ones, but we're not one of the heresies that floats around is that the people read the Old Testament and then they put America in the place of Israel, of ancient Israel, and that's just not the case. That's not how the text was supposed to be read. But once again, when it comes to biblical interpretation, we must discern what is timely and what is timeless. Was it timely for the Hebrews for this kind of ruling, or is it a timeless command that can be stretched out over? With this very specific case, the command to take off on the 7th year, give it all to God, is timely for them. But what is timeless is the concept of Sabbath. Now, Sabbath is one of those things that's often not really talked about in Christian circles. but it's something I talk about a lot, because I think that in order to have a good rhythm with God, you need to have a day that is just completely dedicated to rest. Even to this day, I take a Sabbath rest. A lot of people have asked me how I juggle everything. And it's because on one day of the week, sometimes it's not even the same day, I completely don't plan anything. That's not saying I don't have any plans, but it's just saying I'm giving this to God as a time for me to rest, a time for me to, um, excuse me, plan to just sit with Him. And that's always what it refreshes me. It's one. This past Sabbath, I went to La Crosse, got some Indian food. It was great. Spur of the moment thing. But this concept of Sabbath, you see this being practiced even until Jesus' day. And Jesus really relaxes the rules on Sabbath, making it more of a heart condition than something that people are forced to do. If you ever hang around Hasidic Jewish communities, they'll have someone to turn on lights for them. They'll have someone to press electronic buttons for them, because they take it so far to an extent that they can't feel comfortable, doing anything that would technically qualify as work. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff, and I think it kind of misses the point. But I'm a Christian looking back, and they're them. And so when I observe Sabbath, I always keep in mind that even God did this. That we have to be really, really intentional about pausing. I, in American society, we are very overworked. In cultures where there's like a 25-hour work week, they've actually noticed a lot more productivity. If you're a farmer, this isn't going to completely apply to you. But because on a farm you have to work every day, and the Torah allows for that. But that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to workaholics, or just how American, Anyway, long story short, if you're a farmer, this doesn't entirely apply to you. I'm talking to people like me. But if we work in a society that expects 40 to 60-hour work weeks, but if you look at countries with 25-hour work weeks, there's actually higher productivity. And it's because they have that time to rest, and because they have that time to rest, what they're able to do is put out better product. And that's not the reason for Sabbath, but it's something I find very kind of compelling. We're not all in that same situation where that could happen, but it just kind of makes the case, at least for me, that we're designed for Sabbath. That we're designed to commune with God during these moments of rest. If there's one thing, honestly, that I admire about the Seventh-day Adventists, it's that they are so intentional about taking that day off. They get a little, I think, legalistic about it. But we don't seem to get how important Sabbath is. We don't seem to get that this is something God longs for us to do. Because, the American ideal is to keep go, without pausing. I'm a victim of that, But we need to realize that, rest is very important to God. And just because it's countercultural doesn't mean that it's not biblical. And even my dad, he works probably 100 hours a week. he always insists on taking Sunday off because, he's a truck driver. And so, yeah, it's like you just take a day off, man, but don't take a day off with the intentionality of it being just about you. Take that day off with the sense of, I'm giving all my burdens up to God. I'm just going to leave it in his hands because he knows how to do it better than I do. So that's the timeless message we can take out of this. What's the timeless message we can take out of Deuteronomy? Well, it's pretty much the same kind of command with Jubilee. But with this, it's a forgiveness of debts. This is a lot more timely for how this community specifically runs things. But I kind of want to talk about remembering wrongs people have done to you, when you're in community with them. I think that basic message of forgiveness is timeless. That message that we are to just forget what the things kind of people have done to us if they're not serious. In the small town communities, this is what I've noticed everywhere. I've been living and preaching in small towns for at least 7 years. One community I preached in regularly, they had 5 churches within their town, and the way they determined their conflicts was depending on what kind of church they went to, and it was always a big deal. And so it was just not, it just seemed petty to me. But we're not used to, as communities, this idea of forgiveness and forgetting. And most of the time, we tend to hold on to things that ultimately don't matter. And I'm convinced that it's just easier to be angry. It's easier to look the other way, not talk to the people that upset us. But if we're living in community, we have to be willing to make those reconciliations. We have to be willing to forgive and forget. It's really funny, speaking about that one community. It's a town of 800 people, had 2 Methodist churches. I preached at the Free Methodist. And then it had a basement church. It was a Baptist church, and it was not. They started because they felt no one was preaching the true gospel. Then there was a Christian church and a Presbyterian church. Every pastoral meeting I attended, it wasn't very many because I had a packed schedule. But every pastoral meeting I attended, there was no discernible difference in theology. It was entirely a political thing, I think. If I mentioned the town earlier in this, I apologize. But it was so undiscernible, this theology between all these churches, that eventually 2 churches became one. And they were a Presbyterian church and a Church of Christ. Usually of very different traditions. But this is what happens when we let conflict kind of fester for too long. Instead of churches being their own thing and being their own unique identity in God, they turned into political posts. They turned in political in the sense that it defined how people interacted with each other. And, I'm someone that believes, if you're going to a Catholic church, that I would love for that church to be fully Catholic. If you're going to a Baptist church, I would love for that church to be fully Baptist. I think there's unique identities given to churches that God wants us to follow through, because there's great things in every Christian tradition. People want to start fights with me, but I just think that we're all one big dysfunctional family, whether we like it or not. And we have to learn to appreciate each other. I love being a Quaker. I got my master's in Quaker studies because it speaks currently to the things I experienced about this journey towards shalom, or peace with me, peace with others, and peace with God. And, I'm a hippie now, I guess. It's just one of those things that I talked with actually a missionary to Navajo reservation. When was this class? Monday. He came from Reformed Church of America, and it was one of the best conversations I've ever had because of how his theology influenced him to be on this reservation, and how his theology influenced him to embrace this spiritual practice of lament, and how he viewed discipleship. It was fantastic. But he wouldn't have those perspectives unless he was proudly a part of something. And, that's the danger I think we see in a lot of American culture, is that they too often treat these churches in a consumerist way. Does that make sense? We're just not good at forgiving. We're just not good at forgetting. If a church or people don't fulfill this kind of role that we expect them to, we hold on to that forever. I include myself on that boat because I find myself sometimes just remembering things I shouldn't remember. But God calls us to a higher standard. God calls us to a better way of life. And that's kind of the message of Jubilee, is it's the idea of a fresh start. And this idea of being willing to let go. There are some things that have been done to us. I always have these disclaimers, and it's because I'm aware I'm always preaching to diverse crowds, and I don't know who watches these, but there are things that have been done to us that do need therapy, that do need counseling, and we can't expect immediate forgiveness. For certain things, forgiveness is a journey, right? But if I'm holding on to the fact that someone flipped me off once, or if I'm holding to the fact that I saw something weird, that's on me. That's, it's just, I gotta let it go. I gotta let go of the little things that offend me that the person probably didn't intend. I gotta let go of just conflicts, because what's the point of me dwelling on them when God has better things for me to do? So that's my message for today. To keep the spirit of Jubilee, make sure you keep your Sabbath rest, but also be intentional about forgiving and forgetting. Always forgive and forget. Because those things are always going to come between you and God when you're in prayer or when you're reading the Bible. Those images of the people you've hurt, those images of people who've hurt you, they'll always come between you and God. Eventually, if it's not happening now, it'll happen eventually. And that's because the Holy Spirit brings up those memories. And God's invitation for you is to give it to Him. Sometimes you have to give it to Him repeatedly. And that's valid too, because, we're human. But we need to be just that intentional about the way we forgive others and the way we practice that. Because pretty soon you're going to have a huge list of people that have angered you or offended you. And you won't know what to do with that. It is so much better to live in the freedom of forgiveness. It is so much better to live in the spirit of Jubilee. So let's practice Jubilee together, and just keep our eyes looking forward. If you need anything, just let me or any Valen Friends people know. I'm praying for all of us as a community, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all back here again. I don't know how to... This is really weird, just talking to a camera. But I'm looking forward to interacting with you all again. Go enjoy this beautiful day. And as usual, grace and peace, and go wash your hands.